This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Coragen Max insecticide from FMC. Get fast, selective, extended control of grasshoppers, Bertha armyworms, diamondback moth, and cutworms in a convenient, concentrated formulation. Coragen Max insecticide works alongside beneficials for a 1-2 punch that keeps the fight going long after you've left the field.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday, midweek edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Also, a big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast, Canada, the U.S., or beyond. It's great to have you here. And of course, as we're going to hit the field, this is a great time to be listening to Rural Radio throughout the whole entire day. Great lineup of agricultural programming. Keeps you on the inside on what's going on in the world of North American agriculture, for sure. I'm still in Kansas City. I'm here for the NAMA convention. Had a great day yesterday. Did the Ad Farm Farm Voice event in downtown Kansas City. I got to host a panel. I was joined by Allison Flynn from Merck and Carl Wyant from Nutrien. Had a really good discussion about sustainability. There was also a farmer panel there. And as well, there was a consumer outreach panel as well. So there was a lady there from the Animal Ag Alliance, Vitelli, a new startup in the animal genetics area. So it was a really, really good day. And, of course, ended with the fantastic happy hour as well. And, it was really cool because I saw a lot of people there that haven't seen for a while. But did get a chance to meet Nick, I think I said his name right, Nick Guterman. He farms in Missouri and listens to this show all the time. So a big shout out to Nick, who he did a really good job on the farmer panel talking about sustainability and how he uses no-till and cover crops and just his overall outlook on sustainability as a farmer in Missouri. So it was great to meet Nick, and big shout out to him and all the best of luck with planting this season to Nick. Oh, and all of you, everybody else too, but big shout out there. Okay, today on the show, we'll be joined by Jim Wiesemeyer, DC policy analyst with Pro Farmer. Jim and I are going to talk about, now that we've passed this big foreign aid package, large, like $66 billion going to Ukraine, 95 in total, $95 billion in total. Involves the Indo-Pacific region, it involves Israel, and it, of course, involves aid to Ukraine. What does this mean for the Farm Bill? Can the Farm Bill now actually grab some traction? Or are we going to see something like immigration and dealing with the southern border steal up all the oxygen? We heard from the House Speaker, I think it was yesterday, Speaker Johnson, say that they don't think they're going to pass immigration legislation this year before the election. So maybe that does provide a bit of a runway for the Farm Bill. We'll have to find out what Jim has to say about that. We're also today going to have a new episode of the Farm Safety Roundup. We're going to talk today about entanglements with Mike Wilson. Entanglements are a very serious farm safety issue. What do you got to do to prevent them? And what are the things that you need to do and be aware of because we are in a hurry. Sometimes you need to slow down to speed up. And farm safety is very much like that. We'll also have some time today for the top ag news stories of the day. I've also got some data that I want to share with you about how Canadian farmers feel about biofuel policy. And what's interesting and why I'm bringing this up today is I'm still kind of trying to wrangle in my head the budget issue where ethanol was left out of some of that funding when it comes to biofuels. My perception has always been the Canadian farmer is not as hyped up on biofuels as maybe the government thought they would be when they put out some of the details on the clean fuel regulation. So I've got some data that, honestly, a bit of a sneak peek, bit of a preview, it's pretty neutral. So we'll talk about that and maybe who is excited and maybe who's not. I got some demographics to talk about inside of that. If you have any feedback on today's show, you can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. You can also call the RealAg feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. Unfortunately, if you listen to yesterday's show, I ended the show and I said, I got to go to Kauffman Stadium. I'm going to the Blue Jays game. Slight problem with that. I never made it. I may have to turn in my Blue Jays card. Blue Jays are here for 4 games. And I am 10 minutes, 15 at most, from the stadium. And I don't think I'm going to get over there. I've had people even calling me out about this, sending me text messages like, "What kind of Blue Jays fan are you?" Clearly not a good enough one. So it's been hard, but I'm working. I'm working. So Blue Jays, of course, lost yesterday, and I can't go tonight either. I got a supper meeting. So yeah, I know you're feeling really sorry for me, and I can't go tomorrow afternoon because it's a day game, and I'm tied up all afternoon in meetings as well. So this kind of, yeah. My Blue Jays shirt is in my suitcase. My Blue Jays hat is hanging on the door. Sad, everybody. It's very, very sad. Hopefully the Blue Jays can win the next 2 and take 3 of 4 in the series. But things are looking pretty good. I like the team is playing a lot better. I like it. Last night gave up 3 unearned runs, though. What is going on? I think it was Vladdy that made the big error. But, yeah, I know. My Blue Jays card is really, really in question here. Okay, let's take a break. And when we come back, we are going to hear from Jim Wiesemeyer, pro farmer, DC policy analyst. What's the status of the Farm Bill? Does it have a path now that foreign aid package has been approved by the House and the Senate? We'll hear from him when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. It's now time for a product spotlight. We're joined by Jody Griffin, program coordinator for the Livestock Price Insurance Program. Why should producers purchase an LPI policy?
You know, listening to you and Ann over the last couple of weeks on those market reports, because LPI is a forward-looking, market-driven program, that type of news also set that back on the price insurance. At the beginning of March, you could buy calf coverage at $394. Well, now we're down to that $366 range. And if the message has got to be sent to say anything, it's that now is not the time to get complacent when we're in this type of environment. This tool is as important as we always say it is, but I would say it's even more important. And I just need to remind these producers that LPI is about the best defense you can have against a border closure threat. Price insurance, it's about protecting the down in the market.
Make sure, everybody, you go to lpi.ca to find out more.
Choose Viatude fungicide and unleash best-in-class sclerotinia protection in canola and premium protection against white mold in soybeans. Viatude contains a powerful premix of Onmira Active and prothioconazole. This unique combo delivers high-performance disease control, crop safety, mix compatibility, resistance management, and advanced mobility for excellent coverage and superior plant protection. Choose Viatude fungicide for stronger, more vigorous crops.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. You know, for balanced nutrition with micronutrients, the best answer is Wolftrax DDP from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Wolftrax can ensure nutrient availability through a crop's growth cycle, visit kochag.ca. Let's talk about what's going on in Washington, D.C. Definitely an interesting place this week. We're talking to Jim Wiesemeyer. He is a Pro Farmers D.C. policy analyst. Hey, Jim, how are you doing?
Always good to be on your program. And now that we've got the $95.3 billion foreign aid bill, we can finally get to maybe some ag bills.
Yes. I'm going to get to the farm bill just in a second. Just on that foreign aid package of bills, I think there was 4 in total. Is this Speaker Johnson proving that he is up to the job? Somebody very inexperienced when it comes to lawmaking, very much on the back, behind the scenes in the past, thrust into the speakership after what happened to Kevin McCarthy. This is him getting some work done.
Yeah, I think it. I think it is. I think you're spot on in that. And in this town, sometimes, especially if you're a new speaker, if you don't have years and years of leadership position, you're kind of down for the 9 count before you even start. And that's the way he was by some very good reporters in this town. He has finally found out that we can have a coalition government in the House by working with the Democrats. And the Democrats, of course, their self-interest there, eyes wide open there. But this has neutered, at least for now, the rebel Republicans in the House. And if he wants bills, they're going to have to continue this approach. And yeah, he may have a motion to vacate on him, but the Democrats are signaling they're going to help him stay in office, by the way.
I wonder what was in that security briefing that people are reporting, really thrust him to be motivated to get this support to Ukraine. I'm because a lot of people are reporting that really was the trigger point here for him to be very motivated. I wonder what he did, what we don't know that he found out in that security briefing that all of a sudden, hey, we got to get this done.
I think a couple things that Putin would win that battle, and he would not stop at Ukraine. He would go on to the other Eastern European countries, some, and that would bring in NATO. So you either do it now and limit the U.S. Direct action, or you're in a full-fledged conflict. And I think they convinced him of that.
Now that this heavily discussed topic of whether the U.S. would support Ukraine, what would the amount of money that would be adequate from to supporting Israel perspective. Now that is through the Senate and somewhat behind us, we move on to other things. The highway is wide open now for the farm bill to actually get some attention, Jim. What do we need to be watching out for here?
Well, in middle of May, we're going to have House Ag Chairman G.T. Thompson. He's Republican from Pennsylvania. He's going to issue what we call the chairman's mark, the initial text of the bill. And I'm telling you, it's almost ready. They're going to come out with questions and answers documents. So that tells me they have geared up. They're beginning their briefings, by the way, with some commodity groups. So you could see some leaking of this. But as far as Canada is concerned, some of the initial proposals that I know about is we're going to double the funding for U.S. trade promotion program, market access program, and other trade policies. Now, I will tell you, Shaun, and I know you've seen the same thing. The vast majority of observers of this farm bill give very low to any odds that it's going to be done this calendar year. But I'm going to reserve judgment because now, from what I know about this coming House bill, it's fairly equitable when it comes across our broad expanse of U.S. agriculture. So I think it could gather momentum, but there's a caveat here. The Democrats in the House, relative to the Farm Bill, are in disarray. They have not been, I know this is sensitive to them, they have not been adequately briefed by their ranking chairman, Scott, from Georgia.
Yep.
And so they don't have a counter proposal at this time, nor have they heard about some of the proposals that they're going to get from the House Republican bill, that some of which they may like. Now, they won't like some other things, food stamps and things like that.
Is the chairman's mark typically one of bipartisan, or does it typically come from one side of the aisle?
Well, usually it's bipartisan, but that's a word not in this town. Right. I will tell you that G.T. Thompson, the chairman, has had a hard time. I think for the first time in weeks, I was told he actually talked to the ranking member earlier this week, and that was the first time in weeks. So how can you buy in something when you're not even talking? So I think this one will be a Republican bill, as opposed to a traditional, out of courtesy, the chairman and the ranking chairman. That's how it's been done in most of the farm bills I've covered, and I've covered 11 out of the 19 that we've had. That's usually how it's done, but nothing's normal anymore.
So the chairman's mark puts kind of a flag in the ground, or it's like, okay, let's
Here we
move.
go.
Here we go. Okay, so
Yeah, and where the
that's good.
votes are, and where are the votes? Because then we have what we call a markup.
Yep.
And I've been told that once they drop this bill, the second or third week of May, I guess, 5 days later, they'll have the markup. So first they'll let it out and let people read it. Okay, I don't know whether it'll be the full text or not, but it'll be fairly much detailed as far as summaries and things like that on all the titles. Then they'll have a markup. The key in the markup will be if any Democrats approve that a chairman's mark. If they don't, then you're going to have trouble on the House floor because much like what we've seen in the foreign aid bill, G.T. Thompson's going to need Democrats to vote for this bill because there'll be a few Republicans who will not vote for this bill for many different reasons.
Yeah, last Friday, you and I and Chip were talking about the farm bill and how all the different angles of it. And one of the things that you had dropped or discussed was this issue of corn and beans, the Midwest,
yes,
versus the interests of cotton and sugar in the South.
Yes.
Give us some updates on that.
Okay, it's what we call the reference prices. They used to be called target prices.
Yep.
There's going to be variable increases in that depending on the commodity. Now, just think about it. In the U.S., we have about 88 million acres of corn. So every percentage point increase in the reference price really can potentially cost a lot of money. So they're not going to get the same percentage increase as, say, rice or cotton or peanuts, if you will. And but that at least gave the possibility that it's not going to be an equitable bill. But in my discussions with the some of the people involved in this forthcoming legislation, there are other areas where the corn and bean sector and other commodities, wheat, are going to be favored, and usually that's in the details in the ARC program, the two different programs we have for the Title I, and perhaps in the crop insurance area, both in the more incentives to buy up crop insurance, more subsidies, if you will, and also in what we call an area-wide program, SCO, that will help out a number of farmers and limit the need, not obliterate the need for ad hoc disaster. So I'm a little more comfortable now that this won't be a north-south divide that some people feared.
With the slippage in commodity prices, and slippage being a light description of what has happened, has that lessened the volume of the reference price increase push?
No, because how long will this go on? And if you increase that reference price, that means you're going to have payments if these prices are low.
Yeah.
Okay. And here's the kicker on the timing. I don't want to get too wonky on your audience, but we have what we call a budget baseline for the Farm Bill. Well, the current one, you're going to get an update sometime this June, Shaun. The Farm Bill proponents do not want to go into another baseline, because if you do, that'll delay everything, because everything's going to have to be rescored.
Oh, okay.
So that's why the pressure to get this marked up by June is the key. That's your key timeline now. And it made sense when I heard that. Sometime in June, new budget baseline, which will reflect lower prices, which means that the score of the Farm Bill is going to go up beyond the $1.51 trillion over 10 years.
A lot of money. It's a lot of money. Okay, another item that's happening, Mexico and the U.S. in a hard-fought battle when it comes to export of U.S. corn into the country. We're going to have a resolution on this?
Yeah, the Mexican official, if not officials, indicated yesterday Tuesday that by September this thing should be resolved. And that kind of squares with what we were told a year ago, that once Mexico held their June elections and Obrador, AMLO, is no longer president, it was a domestic issue for him because he comes from southern Mexico. That's where the majority of tortillas are made, and that's GMO corn for food. Yeah. And so, yeah, but what will Mexico want in return? They're signaling that they have some aspects of their trade, sorry, that they want to bridge into this review of USMCA, in 2026. So that they're going to, want some items as well.
I don't see, Jim, at all a situation where all three countries say, this deal's good. Let's just rubber stamp it and roll it over. I think we're headed to some form of a relook at this. What are you hearing?
Well, you have to look at who's the leaders of all the countries by that time, especially in the U.S., because Trump can bring in a very aggressive.
Well, he's for sure going to want to redo it.
Stance. I think if it's Biden and our current U.S. Trade Rep Catherine Tai, if you recall, she was a principal writer of the enforcement language in the USMCA. So I think they would more focus on enforcement. Has there been adequate enforcement? And if not, even improve that further. If it's Trump, all bets are off because he'll see what action has been going on. But, the U.S.-Mexico trade is pretty lofty, and the investment money going in, not only from the U.S. but other countries, as you get nearshoring and as we're moving not totally away, but definitely away from China, Mexico is going to be an increased opportunity for U.S. investors.
And finally, we got to talk about HPAI. I think the situation of avian influenza impacting the dairy herd in parts of the U.S. I've been talking to a lot of stakeholders in Canada and the U.S., and geez, this one has people very concerned, most definitely. And what's interesting, Jim, several different mainstream outlets, the New York Times, and I believe the other one was the Wall Street Journal, very critical of USDA in terms of the transparency on some of the testing and what they're finding.
Yes, and Science Magazine too. That caught people's attention. Read the article in Science Magazine because that's the premier area there. You had three agencies yesterday release a statement: USDA, the CDC, and FDA, relative to finding this in pasteurized milk. It's still safe. But let's go bottom line, and we've been discussing this, Shaun, on AgriTalk. There's a lot more cases than what they're finding initially. So where is it coming from? That's what they're trying to identify. And I've heard different conjectures, the milking equipment, maybe even from the hog industry. Now, that's conjecture. I want to stress that. Yeah. But it's sensitive.
Yeah, most definitely.
Very sensitive.
Hey, Jim, thank you so much for joining us here today. Hey, I really appreciate it. It's great to see you. All the best to you. You got a busy week in D.C., so let's get back to some of that Farm Bill coverage. Thanks so much, bud. I really appreciate it.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify.
Before you get back in the field this year, spend some time with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Get all the information you need on hybrid selection, planting depth, crop inputs, and more from a wide range of industry experts. A massive library of video content is available on demand when you need it most. Spend your time outside of the field, inside the classroom, with the Corn School on RealAgriculture.com. Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
And welcome back to Real Ag Radio. You want to use a PGR in your cereals, but no time for a separate pass? Manipulator PGR can be applied as early as 1 tiller. Just add it to your herbicide to reduce lodging risk, increase harvest efficiency, and maximize yields. Talk to your retailer for more info and to confirm acceptable tank mixes. Great product manipulator there from Belgium. Okay, I want to talk about biofuels. And I have always said in a lot of my speeches that there is a difference in terms of how biofuels resonate in the farming community in Canada versus the U.S. And especially in the Midwest, when it comes to ethanol, farmers very, very pro-ethanol in a vast majority. In Canada, I've never really got the same kind of love for the opportunity of biofuels. There's differing points of view is maybe the best way to put it. So in January, we had asked farmers through Real Agri Studies, how do they see biofuels and the clean fuel regulation in Canada? Is it a positive on your business or is it a negative on your business? And the data or the information and the responses are kind of fascinating and kind of confirm sort of what I had a feel for in terms of the reaction. So let's look a little deeper here for sure. So, okay, we have basically have 35% of Canadian farmers saying it actually has a negative impact on my business. 14% of that being very negative. Only 10% of respondents said very positive impact. 32% were slightly positive impact. And there was 24%, so essentially a quarter of the sample said, I'm not really sure. So let's dig into what does that actually mean. When we index it and we look at -2 being the most negative, +2 being the most positive, farmers are actually neutral. It's 0.01. You can't get any closer to 0. Farmers in Canada are neutral on the benefit to their farm businesses when it comes to biofuels and the clean fuel standard. So are there groups inside of that sample that answered in January that are a little bit more negative or positive than some of the others? Here's again what we found. When it comes to livestock producers, they were actually the most negative, which you would maybe expect because there is an assumption or a thought out there that, hey, more demand for crops to go into biofuels is more demand that I have to compete with when it comes to feeding my livestock. Primarily crop growers, though, only a 0.16. So kind of sort of positive, not really. Crop farmers being fairly close to neutral. It's both crops and livestock that actually were just slightly negative as well. So the livestock producer definitely holding that ground there at -0.53. Now, when we look at some of the other groups here, okay, so if we look at it by farm size, for example, what we find is that the smallest growers, the most negative impact. So -0.52. Remember, -2 most negative, +2 the most positive. And it's the smallest farmers that are essentially saying that, hey, I'm the most negatively impacted here. Interesting enough, the larger farmers also in the negative. The most positive were farmers between 2.5 and 5 million in farm revenues. Also positive were the farmers between 1 million and 2.5, and farmers between 500 and 1 million in revenue. We'll skip over acres because this is national. Let's look at age as a factor. Okay, so if we look at it from the standpoint, age is a factor in how you feel about biofuels. The younger you are, the more positive you are on biofuels and the impact. The older you are, the more negative you are. Okay, so if you were 45 and over, you felt that biofuels were a slight negative impact on your farming business. If you were basically 44 and younger, you felt it was a positive on your farm business, and actually under 35 being the most positive at a 0.57 out of 2. Let's look at it from the standpoint of region. Now, here's the surprise. So and I have tested this on a lot of people. If I was to ask, who do you think would be the most positive about biofuels and the clean fuel standard in Canada? The West or the East? Most people say the same thing to me. Shaun, it's East. That's where the corn's grown. They got the most developed ethanol industry. It's going to be the East. It's a little bit more ingrained. You're also going to get the Midwest effect moving north. It's got to be the East. It's actually wrong. Western Canadian farmers, slightly positive. Okay? Western Canadian farmers, slightly positive. Eastern Canadian farmers, slightly negative. It's actually the reverse. Now, both of these are fairly close to neutral. Okay? We've got Western Canadian farmers at 0.08, and we've got Eastern Canadian farmers at negative 0.13. So we're talking the slightest of margins here, but it's the opposite of what one would think. I mentioned earlier that livestock farmers, the most negative of all the different types of farmers, and I can tell you that swine farmers are the most negative of that group. Beef farmers, the least negative of the different livestock groups, and dairy in between the two of them. So that's kind of the look at how Canadian farmers feel about biofuels. And in general, in cumulative and aggregate, I think it comes out like we thought. I think the government misread when they came up with the clean fuel standard, clean fuel regulation. I think they thought that farmers were going to jump on this as a big positive. And maybe farmers should be, but there clearly is some communication gaps here. Companies in the area of renewable diesel or ethanol, they need to do a better job. And farm groups, if they believe in it, like say the Canola Council of Canada that has been very pro-biofuel from a canola standpoint with renewable diesel, they're going to have to do a better job of communicating those benefits to farmers, because at this point right now, farmers clearly not just going crazy having parties and streamers and balloons about it. They've got some concerns. So there's some data for you to chew on. Send me your feedback, shaney@realagriculture.com. Would love to know what you think about this. And I'm going to post some of these slides and some of the data up at realagriculture.com by the weekend as well. Hey, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a very important topic. We're talking farm safety when we come back. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Dad, we missed the window for a PGR in our cereals.
Why didn't you add it to the herbicide?
What?
With Manipulator PGR, we can apply as early as one tiller. Just add it to the herbicide, no separate pass.
Don't miss out. Manipulator PGR is proven in wheat, durum, barley, and oats to shorten plants and even out the main stem and tillers. This results in reduced lodging risk, improved harvest efficiency, and increased yield. Talk to your crop protection retailer for more info and to confirm acceptable tank mixes.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
Welcome to the Farm Safety Roundup here on RealAgriculture.com. Today we're talking about machine entanglements. You know, agriculture is considered one of the most hazardous industries, and heavy machinery is the culprit in so many farm-related injuries and fatalities. But by their very nature, powerful machines used to handle large bales, plant or harvest crops are they're dangerous to operate, let's be honest. And accidents can mean life-changing injuries like amputation or even worse. The reality is, in many cases, the root cause of these accidents is human error. And that means, to be honest, they're preventable in some form or fashion. Today we're talking about machine entanglements and prevention. Our guest is Mike Wilson. Mike is a senior health and safety consultant with Workplace Safety and Prevention Services and a machine and robotics specialist. Mike, it's great to chat with you.
Good afternoon, Shaun. Good to chat with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, very, very important topic here. This is one for sure. If you've been impacted or you know somebody that's been impacted, this is life-changing when it comes to dangerous things on the farm. Understanding how machine entanglements happen is really one of the keys for sure to prevention. So let's kind of start with that, the proactive side of it. Where do machine entanglements mostly occur on the farm?
Well, Shaun, I got to tell you, with all the equipment you have on a farm, there's no shortage of entanglement hazards. Balers, headers on combines, augers, fans, soil mixers, planting machines, goes on and on. The one that we hear about the most is the PTOs, or the power takeoffs from a tractor. Very dangerous part. Why is it dangerous? Well, it turns at very high speed. It doesn't take much to get close to it. And then if it's loose clothing, whether it be a shoelace, a glove, what have you, boom, in you go. And Shaun, I'll tell you, I had a colleague of mine a few years back was giving a safety talk to a group of farmers, and they were having this conversation about the PTO, and farmer stood up and said, you know what, I encourage the folks that work for me to step over that PTO just because it saves time. And before she could even comment, there was a second farmer that stood up and told a quick little story I'd just like to share with you. He had told anybody working on his farm, you stay away from the PTO. You give it at least a meter. Don't even get close to it. And on this particular day, there was actually a breeze, and one of the workers around the PTO, there was a loose thread on his shirt. And by some miracle, he was actually holding on to the wagon. The wind blew this thread into the PTO, tore the shirt straight off his back. Now, like I said, a miracle the guy wasn't hurt. Still a lot of bruising, but could have been a lot worse. And I'll tell you, Shaun, that was the end of that conversation pretty quick. PTO, hands down, one of the most dangerous things you'll see on the farm.
Okay, but a lot of machinery now is equipped with safety mechanisms or safety features to protect workers, isn't it? Like, why is this still a thing?
Well, you know what? A lot of machines do come with barriers, guards, shields to protect people from these hazards. And they are usually, they're bolted in place. They're on where they should be. But you know as well as I do, from time to time, you got to fix things. Those covers come off and maybe they don't make it back on. Maybe the guard got broken because it got jammed in something. And if those barriers aren't in place, well, that's how people can get hurt. Now, in a perfect world, let's say the barrier's been there for years. Maybe it's rusted out or it's broken down the road, and people got used to having the guard in place. And if it gets left off or it is broken, now we are exposed to what's behind those barriers, those guards, be it drive belts, drive chains, what have you. So can you get a false sense of security? Yeah, there can be a lot of that. You can have some younger workers that might not even know there's a hazard behind that panel. Or, I hear a lot, some of the folks that have been around for a while insist, I know it's there. I'm quick enough or I'm good enough to get out of the way. So at the end of it, Shaun, I got to tell you, the machine doesn't care. Like, if it's turning, if it's moving, if you get in the way, you're going to lose.
And I have to think, like, as you were talking there, the word insurance came to mind, right? Somebody removes a guard because for whatever reason, any sort of justification, somebody gets hurt. That would be one of the very first things I think insurance company would be asking about is, why were these safety guards and voiding of insurance? Like, that just feels like a whole mess.
That's a long conversation. I mean, if I'm the one that's running the equipment, yeah, I have that responsibility. And I know you've got listeners all across the country. Basic responsibilities about making sure the equipment is safe. That's about routine maintenance. Hey, are those guards in place? If they are missing, how do we make sure they get back on before the equipment goes back into use? And you're right, Shaun. At the end of the day, hey, whose equipment is it? And did you take the steps to make sure people are going to be safe? That's not only about making sure the guards are in place, but have they been trained to use that equipment properly?
Yeah. Yeah, good points. Okay, so while we're talking about maintenance and guards, also important to emphasize the importance of lockout, because you really do not want a machine starting up while somebody is working on it.
Absolutely, Shaun. And don't think of working around the equipment as just maintenance and repairs. You got to think of things like cleaning around the machinery or taking care of jams. Again, I had a colleague of mine mentioned a point where some of the headers on the combines, they jam up from time to time, and some people won't even stop that while they're cleaning it out. Well, a lot of dangerous moving parts there for sure that'll make quick work of your fingers and your arm. But you're absolutely right. When you're working on those augers, those conveyors, go over, shut that system off. It might be an electrical breaker. It might even be an electrical plug. Unplug it, snap a lock on it, and put the key in your pocket. As long as that energy source, that electrical, is locked out and your lock is in place, that's your guarantee it's not going to start up while you're working on it. So like you said, Shaun, if your hands are going to be in there changing a belt, changing a sprocket, whatever the case might be, I want to be really sure it's not going to start up while I've got my hands in there. And that's what the lockout does for you. It's your guarantee it's not going to start up. When you're done, take the lock off, turn the power back on. Life's good.
And when we're doing assessments to know kind of what the hazards are, we have farms across the country, all shapes and sizes, and no home yard, for example, is laid out the same. It's not like it's all cookie cutter, right? There's a lot of differences. So what are some of the things that farmers should do to take stock of the hazards that are on their farms?
You know what? The way I would approach it is take a look at it as if you've never seen any of it before, right? Look at those hazards. Right now, I use a pretty simple thing myself when I'm walking around is, does it move? Can I reach it? Would it hurt me? So you think about the combine, you think about augers, you think about conveyors. Is there movement? Yes. Do I have access to it? To your point earlier, if the guard's missing, I might have access. And if I got in there, would it be bad? And, I use a little acronym like MAC, motion, access, consequence. That's how I go to look for those mechanical hazards like entanglement. And sometimes someone will say to me, oh, Mike, you know what? We know that's dangerous. No one's going to put their hand in there. Who's going to do that? And boy, if I had a nickel for every time someone told me that, I'd be a rich man. That's for sure. But like I said, you've got to think of it as someone who's never seen the machinery. Okay. What would you warn them about first? Okay. Does it move? Can they reach it? If they did reach it, would it be bad? You need to know where those hazards are. Certainly make sure you've got the guards in place and develop those operating procedures, training programs. Hey, is this working the way it should? If it's not, let's stop. Let's get it fixed. If you're not familiar with the equipment, ask for some instruction before you start to work on it. And as we said, if the equipment does need maintenance, that's when you're locking it out to protect yourself.
How do we make sure that familiarity doesn't bring complacency when we're talking about safety and using equipment that we're using on a regular basis?
Well, that's the price of safety, eternal vigilance, right? I think everyone does get complacent at some point, Shaun. We don't see the forest for the trees. And we do see it a lot as someone spends his day doing safety. There's an assumption sometimes that, hey, nothing's gone wrong in a very long time, and it probably never will. That's where you start to get into trouble. Now, quick little story. Working around the house a couple of years ago, I was drilling some holes for some concrete anchors. Old hammer mill, cold day, so I had some gloves on. Didn't even think about it. So like rotating drill, wearing gloves. And I got to tell you, to this day, I still see the whole thing in slow motion. Now, fortunately, the drill wasn't at full speed yet, but I can still see my hand wrapping around that drill. I should have had the side handle for the drill. I lost it years ago and didn't even give it a second thought. So a lot of times those hazards do fade into the background just as we go about getting our daily work done. You've got to respect the machine, and the day you don't, that's when something goes wrong. Like we said earlier, if the guard's in place, the risks should be lower, but they're never zero. If the machine can run, there's hazards there. Again, that's the price of safety. You've always got to be on the lookout for those hazards.
Okay, so to wrap up here, what can farmers do to prevent machine entanglements on the farm? What are those things they have to keep top of mind to make sure this doesn't happen to them or people they're working with?
Yeah, sure. A few years back, we had a very simple statement that really sticks with me. Stop, think, act. Whenever you're getting out ready to do the work out on the farm there, what could go wrong? What has changed? Is the weather changing? That's going to change conditions for sure. But when you need to think about the work you're doing, am I properly trained? Am I physically and mentally ready for the work? Hey, there's no timetable when you're working on the farm. You go until the job is done. So fatigue becomes a factor. Do you have the right equipment? Are those guards in place, like we said? Am I in a rush, or is my boss pushing me to get planting or harvesting done? Is the weather going to move? One thing I'm guilty of from time to time, if I'm working on something, the light's going to be bad. It's getting dark and I'm trying to fix this machine just to get the job done. So think about what you need to do. And before you act, make sure the equipment's safe. Do a walk around, a circle check. Again, do you have the right tools and equipment? Maintain the machinery, right? I know a lot of times maintenance falls by the wayside because you're trying to get the job done, but you got to maintain that machine. And ultimately, Shaun, please don't take those shortcuts like stepping over the PTO. I know it saves time, but if somebody gets into that PTO, boy, I'll tell you what, it's going to be pretty bad. Train everybody on what those hazards are. And if they can't do the job safely, then stop the work, take the steps to do the work safe.
And Mike, whenever we make a decision, there's always things we're compromising or we're giving up, right? And so you just made me think of something. Would I rather save time or save a limb? Maybe the best way to look at it.
Well, that's pretty much it. And again, as I said earlier, a lot of people, I for example, PTO, I've stepped over it a bunch of times, nothing's happened. Okay, fine, you've been lucky. Can you guarantee the same luck moving forward? And you're right, with those hazards fading into the background, we get a little complacent. We forget that this machine was built for one purpose, to turn that implement or to move that, turn that auger, drill that post hole, whatever the case might be. We see people that have got their hair pulled into augers. I've seen bootlaces pulled into conveyors, and it's going to be bad. If you look at the stats, the injuries on farms, half are accommodated to machines, and they're going to be bad when they happen. It's not just, I'm going to go to the first aid kit and get a Band-Aid. It's, I need medical attention, and in a lot of cases, I'm not going to be the same when I come back from this. So before you start to think, I'm going to save 10, 15, 20 seconds, what could go wrong? And let's take steps to do our best to avoid that. It's that stop, think, and act that's key.
Hey, Mike, thanks for joining us so much here. Important topic, and I really appreciate you being here on the Farm Safety Roundup.
Excellent. Thanks, Shaun. Have a great day.
Thanks to our friends at Workplace Safety and Prevention Services for helping to get all farmers safely home at day's end. For some really useful tips and tools, I encourage you to go to wsps.ca/farm safety. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, right after this.
Does your end stabilizer contain an active ingredient load high enough to be agronomically effective? If not, it could be costing you time and money. If you're putting down a nitrogen stabilizer, put your trust in Koch Agronomic Services. Solutions like Super U, Tribune, and Anvil. Each delivers high active ingredient concentrations that low-rate products just can't match. Compare how imitator products stack up to agronomically effective solutions at defendyourn.ca.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomists, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomists with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. It's now time for the top ag news stories of the day. Important notice here for grain farmers. Pay attention. The Canadian Grain Commission has revoked the licenses of Zegers Seed Inc., also known as Zegers Canada. Okay, Zegers, Zegers Canada. If this company owes you money for grain deliveries, you need to call 1-800-853-6705 immediately. This is a message from the government of Canada. Let's dig in here on the top ag news stories of the day. And speaking of the Canadian Grain Commission, Federal Agricultural Minister Lawrence MacAulay has announced the appointment of David Hunt as the new Chief Commissioner of the Canadian Grain Commission. Hunt will replace Doug Chorney, whose term expires at the end of April. Chorney chose to not reapply for the job. Hunt has worked for the Manitoba government since 2007, starting as a swine extension specialist and later leading the livestock industry branch in the Agriculture Department. He was an assistant deputy minister for Manitoba Agriculture from 2015 through 23, and most recently served as an assistant deputy minister in the Department of Environment and Climate Change. Canadian companies ramped up their recruitment of temporary foreign workers last year, even as the labor market softened and the unemployment rate drifted higher, according to a story in the Globe and Mail. During the last quarter of 2023, employers were approved to fill more than 81,000 positions through the temporary foreign worker program, according to figures shared by the federal government with the Globe and Mail. It was easily the largest quarter for approval since Ottawa made several employer-friendly changes to the program in the spring of 2022. For the year, employers were approved to fill roughly 240,000 job vacancies, an increase of 7.5% from 22, and more than double what was permitted in 18. You know, I feel that this article in the Globe today is like, there's this underlying sentiment out there that somehow Canadian companies, Canadian employers are trying to avoid hiring Canadians for some of these roles. And that this is sort of a bypass and we're skirting the system. And nothing can be further from the truth. If you actually talk to companies that are using the TFW programs, well, one, say, here's the number one misconception. This labor is not cheap. Two, if we could hire Canadians, we would. And that continues to be somehow forgotten in some of these discussions. I don't. There's a gap in the messaging or the communication, and when I read that article, I thought, man, is this like a government plant? Like, what is this article? Anyway, that's my perception and opinion on that. In other news, I did want to share that, well, Jim covered the Senate passing the foreign aid bill, very large in size, $60 billion going to Ukraine. And some money to Israel and some to the Indo-Pacific. So Jim covered that one in his discussion earlier today. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland says Canada and its allies are taking trade action against China and Indonesia in the nickel market as the two Asian countries tighten their collective grip in the critical mineral. Indonesia has gone from supplying 7% of the global output of nickel to 55% in the past decade, with much of the new production controlled by China-based mining companies with ties to the authoritarian Beijing government. We'll also pay attention for what happens between China and the U.S. as it relates to that foreign aid bill, because in that bill was a timeline for ByteDance to shed its TikTok ownership to an American entity. So that's going to be something as well that is not going to go over very well in China. The OMB completes review of controversial USDA cattle EID tag rule. The Office of Management and Budget has completed its review of proposed USDA rule that would require visually and electronically readable identification tags for cattle and bison. This rule aims to enhance animal identification and traceability during disease outbreaks. However, the proposal has sparked controversy, particularly regarding the financial implications on the cattle industry. Follow this one closely. Talked to a lot of ranchers in the U.S., not very happy about this one, about the costs and things like that. So we're out of time, but we're going to follow that one and do the comparisons between the Canadian system and the American, but it sounds like that one is coming. USDA is going to make it happen. Send me your feedback, Haney at RealAgriculture.com. Thanks so much, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. We'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this RealAg Radio podcast, brought to you by Coragen Max Insecticide from FMC. When you need to protect your crops from damaging insects, Coragen Max Insecticide delivers fast, selective, extended control of grasshoppers, Bertha armyworms, diamondback moth, cutworms, and more. Ask your retailer today.